So I started to struggle with sleep because of real life stresses. And that went on for quite a while. And that was the first time I experienced the panic. And it terrified the life out of me. I thought I was going to die. I did not know what was happening, and it was just absolutely terrifying. And I would look at people in the street and think to myself, you have no idea how lucky you are that you're not dealing with this problem. And I wish I was you. I wish I was the person walking their dog. I was like, I wish I could just take pleasure in walking a dog. And I did the usual things. I started, I got a sleep app, I got a white noise, relaxing music, soundscapes, I got myself an eye mask, and those things would all be beneficial for a night or two, and then it would stop. Somewhere along the line, your name came up, and I just straight away Googled your name and checked out your YouTube channel. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I was seen and I was heard, and somebody understood. And it was just such a massive relief. The fear is less likely to come because I know what to do.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another really special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Edel with us. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So nice to have you. And for the audience who wonders how this happened, well, you sent an email where you shared that you had read Set It and Forget It and tuned into the channel, and it had been really helpful. And I think I then asked you if you wanted to be a guest, and you said yes, and here we are. So with that said, yeah, tell us in your words, how did you start having trouble sleeping?
I think I probably always have been a slightly anxious person, and as far back as I can remember, I would periodically have trouble. My trouble is getting to sleep. Once I can get to sleep, I'm okay, but it was the initial getting to sleep. And right back to childhood, I can remember just going through periods where I would really struggle to get to sleep. And then it would sort of resolve and I'd be okay for a while, and then it would come through again. And it was just a kind of a common feature of my life. About 13 years ago, I was going through some real life stresses. My oldest child has a disability and he has some complex needs, and we were going through a really difficult patch with him. So I started to struggle with sleep because of real life stresses. And that went on for quite a while. And that was the first time I experienced the panic. And it terrified the life out of me. I thought I was going to die. I did not know what was happening, and it was just absolutely terrifying.
And I'm sorry to interrupt there, but was it, you had some challenges with your son, and what exactly was it that caused these like panics? Was it just simply that you didn't fall asleep, or was it something else?
Yeah. No, I think I was asleep I was struggling to sleep for quite a few days. And then just out of the blue, I just started to feel these feelings I'd never felt before. There was this obvious surge of something through my body. I started shaking. I could feel my heart racing. But what was worse than anything else was just this incredible fear. And I didn't know what I was afraid of, but it was just overwhelming. I couldn't lie in bed. And I thought I was going to die. I thought I was having a heart attack and I was going to die. And thankfully, my husband sort of helped me calm down. But that happened repeatedly. And I went to see the doctor. I think too with my sleep, I bought the whole thing of you must have 8 hours sleep every night, and developing, sleep debt is a really bad thing for your health. And so I was always sort of trying to sleep according to the clock rather than according to what, how I felt. And when I had the panic attack, I just became so distressed with it. And I went to see my doctor, and that was the first time I had sleeping pills. And they got me to sleep, and that was great. And then, of course, the thing was, oh my gosh, but now I'm going to need them again and again and again. And then if I do all that, I'll be addicted to them. And then I was just in this cycle of worry and really agonizing about sleep. And it just seemed to, that happened for a period of time, and then I don't know why, but I started to sleep again, and then within a couple of months that would come back, and I'd go through that same sort of cycle all over again. And I definitely felt like the ability to sleep was outside of me. It was beyond my control, and I was dependent to some extent on, when things got bad, I was dependent on the pills, but then the pills were just such a negative because there was so much talk from my doctor about, oh, they're addictive, and then we've got a whole new problem. So it was kind of just this never-ending feeling, and there was always this feeling that there was like this terror lurking out there that was going to come and get me at any point, and I didn't know when it was going to happen. And it would, and I did try to keep telling myself, you've come through this before, you'll come through it again. But at the beginning of this year, I caught the flu, and I got it quite badly, and I wasn't used to being sick. I'm normally fairly healthy, and so it hit me hard, and I began catastrophizing straight away, thinking, oh my gosh, what's going wrong? And of course, I stopped sleeping, and the panic came. And it was the worst it had ever been. For the first time ever, I was awake an entire night, and the adrenaline surges just kept on going through the night right into the next day. And at that point, I said to my husband, we got to go to emergency. And I remember thinking on the way there, I had this huge store in the medical profession to fix this problem. I just kept thinking, I'll go to them and they'll give me something and that will fix it. And I can remember on the car on the way there, I thought to myself, and this is the very first time I've ever thought it, if the doctors can't give me something that takes away this feeling, I am going to have to find a way to end my life, because I can't live my life feeling this. It was just, and it's hard to put into words what that feeling is, but it's just horrendous. It's frightening, and it's depressing, and it takes away all your ability to make good judgments. And so yeah, it was just horrendous. And the doctors were amazing at the hospital, and they did calm me down. And they straight away said, the doctor I was talking to said, I really recommend seeing a psychologist to work on why, what are the underlying things that are causing this to happen, which I was highly motivated to try and fix the problem. So I straight away went and found a psychologist and connected with the first one, which was good. I was expecting I'd have to try out a few. And we started to work on some of those bigger picture issues. And, you've heard them all before. I'm a type A personality, unrelenting, high standards, catastrophize. Particularly my children, I spend a lot of time worrying about my children. And so we had a lot of therapy about that. And we did talk about my actual sleep, and she was, using the CBT-I sorts of approach with it. And I felt like we were working really well on the big picture about me addressing, the thought patterns and the background and the upbringing and everything that had caused me to be a highly anxious person, which was great. But we weren't getting very far on actually me sleeping. And so every night it was, what's going to happen tonight? What's going to happen tonight? And I did the usual things. I started, I got a sleep app. I got a white noise, relaxing music, soundscapes. I got myself an eye mask, and those things would all be beneficial for a night or two, and then it would stop. And then I had my laundry list of things that I had to have ready, set up for going to bed. And like a lot of people, I came to hate my bed. I came to dread that space. It wasn't like a nice, comfortable, safe space for me. And I went to a naturopath. I was just reaching out for anything I could. And in this continued cycle of, do I take the medication or don't I? And I tried the antihistamines that aren't addictive, but, are supposed to knock you out. Well, they didn't work. And, my last bit of desperation was I turned to Reddit. And I looked up insomnia, and initially I was horrified to see how many people are dealing with long-term insomnia and how miserable it's making them. And somewhere along the line, your name came up. And I just straight away Googled your name and checked out your YouTube channel. And I watched a video that you did with, I think it was an Australian psychiatrist, that he was getting people withdrawing from addictive drugs. And you talked about...
Yeah. His name escapes me, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
He's a young guy, and you just kind of basically outlined your method, and I just straight away thought, oh my gosh, this is really exactly where I am. And I got online and I got Set It and Forget It on my Kindle app, and I devoured it within about 3 hours. And look, I'm sure many people have said this, but I thought he's describing me. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I was seen and I was heard, and somebody understood. And it was just such a massive relief. And I, like, as I said up before, I was highly motivated. I had to fix this problem because my life was turning into a misery. And I just felt so incredibly isolated. I walked a lot in that time. And I would look at people in the street and think to myself, you have no idea how lucky you are that you're not dealing with this problem. And I wish I was you. I wish I was the person walking their dog. I was like, I wish I could just take pleasure in walking a dog. And yeah, for the first time, I didn't feel incredibly isolated. And so that night, that was it. I adopted your method from the day I read it, and I stuck with it. And there were some rough nights, but I came through the cycle, I think, reasonably quickly, probably because I hadn't had an incredibly long spell of it. Mine was more an intermittent insomnia. And I did, like you said, I celebrated every success. Every night, whether it took me hours to get to sleep or not, if I got to sleep without taking that sleeping pill, I celebrated that the next day. And I do find that the panic is a bit tricky because it does undermine your resolve. It just messes with your head. It tells you that the things you know to be true aren't really true. And really, there's this awful demon out there that's going to get you. And so sometimes it was really difficult. But I was absolutely committed to the process. And sometimes when I was awake in the night, I would get out the book and I would read parts of it again to just continue to keep my resolve going. And I have not now taken a sleeping pill in a month, and I have slept every night virtually. I hit one road bump. I started your program when I was in school holidays. I'm a teacher. And the night before I went back to school, inevitably, I started to stress about sleeping before school. And I didn't get very much sleep that night. And I really tried to stick with what you were saying. And I went to school the next day and I made it the best possible day I could make it. And I just kept telling myself, you had a shocking night, but you had an okay day. You got through the day, you taught fine. And so it's not sleeping is not the end of the world. I had a real battle with befriending wakefulness. I was very much afraid of being the only person in the house awake. And when the house was dark and quiet, that felt very scary to me. And I have really learnt now to befriend it. But I came through that bump, took a couple of nights, and I did feel that I was, it took a lot of going back to your book to keep saying to myself, stick with it, but I came through it. And what's changed for me now is that I live by how my body feels. I am up every morning, 6 to 6:30 every day. And I do not go to bed until I'm recognizing, I reckon I'm about a 7.5 hour person. And I'm still on about a 7-hour clock, and I haven't yet sort of taken that window out a little bit. Don't feel like I'm quite ready there. But I think recognizing that I was in bed for too long because I had this idea of I need 8 hours. So I was in bed for too long. And so now I'm in bed by, sort of 11 most nights and up at 6 to 6:30. And I'm going to keep that pattern going. And I probably would like, my next goal is probably just to stretch that window out a little bit and try to see if I can do 7.5 hours consistently. But I'm just the happiest person in the world. I feel like I have control back in my life. I'm able to enjoy things. And the great benefit of having gone through this horrible time is that I'm just appreciating the world so much. Every little thing I'm just so much more alert to and awake to. And it's a beautiful thing, just being able to take a walk in my neighborhood and spend time with my kids and my husband, and all of those things now just have an enjoyment and a pleasure that I wasn't really appreciating before until I went through this really bleak period. I think I wouldn't say I'm through altogether. Out of the blue at different times, a little seed will get in my head that says, what if tonight's really bad? What if? So that still lurks there. but I have the evidence that I've come through a tricky patch since starting, and I'll try to hold on to that. And the proudest thing of all is that I have stopped taking the sleeping pills, and I can sleep. I can sleep without them. I know that now, and oh my God, that's it's just given me back this level of security about myself that is enormous. I thought I was going mad. I thought I was heading into some sort of, I did say to my psychologist, I thought it was the beginning of a descent into madness, and it wasn't at all. And I'm all right. And I am so, so grateful. And I just feel like there are so many people in the world who need to read your book and realize that, they can regain control of things like this.
Wow. Yeah, no, thanks so much for the words of support and for sharing this with our community. And I'm also so very glad you found that mention on Reddit and that led you here. And, as you were saying that at one point you said to psychologist, I think this is the beginning of the descent to madness. In some way, it became almost the opposite, right? It became like the beginning of an awakening and a new take on life, which is a wonderful thing. Now, with that said, let me ask you a few questions, and we can talk about something that I think will be really valuable for the community. And the first one was, if you now find yourself in a place where it takes a while to fall asleep, or you wake up and you're up at night, how do you meet that now?
It would depend. You said in your book, because she was following CBT-I principles, she was very much get out of bed if you're not falling asleep. And then I read your book and you said, if you're in bed and you're comfortable and you're not worrying, there's no reason to get up if you're happy to stay there. So it depends what happens. If I'm feeling, oh yeah, I'm awake and I'm not feeling any panic, I'm not really, then I'll probably stay there for a while. But I'll also get up too, and I'll read, and I'll, there's lots of things that I'll do. I love the fact that you took away the taboo about screens and TV, because I'll do that too. And so I'll just try and get up. I just keep reassuring myself that I've been through this and that it's not the end of the world and that I will be fine the next day. I know I'll be fine. Even if I have to get up early and go to work, I'll be fine. And I'll come through it again.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is that what you taught me about sleep, and then that bigger therapy I was dealing with about my life, I've had to kind of learn to just be kinder to myself, and to let, I don't have to solve everything today. I'm working now on the idea of one step in the right direction. One step forward is all I have to do. I was very outcomes focused. I was very obsessed with, I must fix this, I must get this resolved. And I've learned to just say one step in the right direction is a good thing. And if I could just share one little other story with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have 3 young adult children, and I was having a bit of a bad patch with my middle child. We'd sort of fallen out over some issues, and we were struggling to get our communication on track. And after I went through this patch and I read your book, I met with him and we had coffee, and I just pretty much told him, kind of showed him how I had been, showed him my vulnerability, I suppose, showed him that I'd been struggling. And I said to him, I was, understanding that I had been too outcome focused and all of that. And I think me going through that bad patch, the walls between us just broke down, just completely broke down. And we have rebuilt our relationship with a different phase of both of us recognizing that we can both struggle, we can both be in a bad place, that we can both be trying to figure out the next step. And so, yeah, it's one of those enormous messages that the bad spells nearly always have incredible benefits that come out of them. And really, and I'm almost, I don't know that I couldn't say I'm 100% happy I've experienced this, because it really was the most unpleasant thing I've ever had. But the benefit of having rebuilt my relationship in a really honest way with my son is, that's just a gift.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And that's something I sometimes remind myself of, and the other coaches as well too, that if you help one person leave their struggle with insomnia, that person doesn't live in isolation. You also help that person's friends and family members and everybody else. So that's so nice to hear. And now
pass your book name on to countless people. I have told them you're the name, set it and forget it to everyone.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks so much, Edel. And I wanted to ask you, you said one of the things that have been really helpful for you is to see the value in self-kindness, which to a lot of people initially sounds kind of fuzzy and flimsy, and how's that helpful? So maybe my question to you is like, what do you now see was self-critical of you before? In what ways were you kind of hard on yourself before?
I think I thought I had to do everything perfectly. I thought that if my kids had an issue, I had to fix that issue. I think I did a lot of comparing myself to other people and coming up short in lots of different ways. I was, I've even reflected on things like, I'm a big fan of exercise. I do a lot of exercise, but that I'd get in the pool for a swim and I'd be telling myself, you have to do 50 laps here. It has to be 50 laps. And now I get in the pool and I go, I'll just swim until I feel like I've swum enough. Just a lot of that stuff that I didn't even recognize. Everything was, I had to challenge myself. I had to meet a standard. I had to fix things. I had to sort things out. I had to be the best. I had to, I'd feel very competitive at work. And if other people succeeded, I'd feel very jealous and and I've just really learned how to let go of all of that and be the me I am and understand what it is that I do. And I still like a little bit of a challenge. I still like to try at things, but I'm not in a constant battle to be the best and to be punishing myself and to feel that I have suffered in order to have achieved something. I don't always had to have put myself to the test and worked harder and tried things better. And I did struggle a little bit. My husband has been fantastic. He has lain awake at night and cuddled me through the panic attacks and everything else. But he has struggled to understand because he doesn't experience it himself. And so that for him, it was a lot of, come on, just let's think positive and we'll you'll come through it. And for me, that was pressure. For me, that felt like, well, I'm doing it wrong. I'm obviously doing it wrong. And he was trying to be supportive, but it was putting more pressure on me. And I kept trying to say, I'm trying, but it's not working and I don't know how to fix it. It was a lot of saying, it's not a case of not trying enough. That's not the problem here. I was just coming at it from the wrong way. The way that fear manifests in your brain. And I think, I think for me, a lot of it, probably that perception of a threat, it does go back in many ways to, maybe a lack of security in my early years. And so there's obviously been a little small fear in the back of my mind all through my life. Something bad's going to happen. Something's coming out of the blue to make something bad happen. And then sleep was the latest one. And learning to not fear the lack of sleep. That lack of sleep was not the end of the world, and it's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but it is not the end of the world, and your body will be able to do it by itself.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, you said so many wonderful things there. And the last thing you mentioned here about seeing that little sleep is unpleasant. Nobody wants to sleep little. We all want to sleep well and a good chunk, but it is not at the end of the world, as you said. And then we see that, okay, it's not actually a real threat. It's not something that can really harm us. And having learned that in one kind of dimension of our life, we can see the same pattern, like, oh, that's also not a real threat. That's also not a real threat. And it can be really, really enlightening and helpful. And I also want to ask you what it was like for you to come off the sleep medication. And I'm sure you through the years have been prescribed maybe several things, but what was it? What were you taking? No, not really, just one. What were you prescribed, and what was it like coming off?
It was fine. I had never really gotten onto them consistently. I had taken them for spells, but this fear of addiction just was, the doctor had it right in my face the whole time. So no one ever said to me, go on this and stay on this for a couple of weeks. They were always like, oh, we don't want this. We don't want this. So I didn't find, I knew that in the lead up to this sort of crisis where I got sick and it all got very serious, I knew that I was starting to rely on them too much, not necessarily on an every night basis, but on an as needs basis. Any night I was struggling to get to sleep, I would just take one. And my husband was saying to me, I think you're turning to these too often. I don't think this is a good idea. And I knew so many nights I took one and was asleep long before it ever worked. It was a complete placebo. And so when I read your book, and you said you're giving that the power. You're giving that the power of putting you to sleep when it doesn't have that power. And you said you either stay on it every night or you get right off it. And I just went, that's it. I'm getting right off it because I can't hand those pills any more power. They've held power over my life for a long time, and I need to take back that power. And it was. Yeah, I was sort of tempted a couple of nights, but I really, went back to your book and as soon as I had success, any night I would sleep without one, I was just like, this is great. I can do this. I can do this. So it was, it was very good. And your words, I found some of what you said when I told my psychologist, you were talking the same language as she was, although she had a few different variations. But it was the way you put it. Something about the way you express it, encapsulate it just spoke to me. It just completely captured me, and it described me, and it gave me really good tools. So if I was struggling and I got your book out again, it instantaneously lifted me up again.
That's amazing. That's so wonderful to hear. And by the way, did you watch a lot of the interviews just like this one, or not so much? You mainly read the book and you said, yeah, okay.
The book was the main thing for me. Yeah. The interviews I've watched 2 interviews, and certainly you hear the same stories. But I was more interested in your other ones where you just talk about different issues, and I've watched a couple of them because there's always some insight in those that just sort of helps me along, and I feel like I've got that in my back pocket now forever. I've got the book on my phone, and I've got your interviews, and you've got your little stories that you tell, and I feel like that's my go-to if I will inevitably run into a bad patch again, and that's where I'll go to remember. And yeah, I feel like it's just the greatest service you could possibly have done to the world is to put those things out on YouTube.
Yeah, so I get to hear what you just said quite often, and it's just a huge reward. So I'm very, very, very happy that I did, and that so many people have found them helpful. And I just want to add one thing for you, but also for people tuning in here, and that is that although I think Set It and Forget It is a really great book, especially kind of like an intro book, because it's such an easy read. It has like little nice illustrations and things of that nature. There's some things that I don't emphasize quite as much now as I did then. For example, the part about like really, I think back when I wrote Set It and Forget It, I literally said like celebrating, when you sleep and when you have a good day and things like that. And I think that when something nice happens to us, I think it really helps to like take note of it and see like, wow, see the evidence that there is nothing wrong with me. I can sleep just fine, like, et cetera, et cetera. The little point I just want to make, mainly for the audience, because I think you understood this intuitively, is that what we don't want to do is like celebrate that we slept as kind of a win or a victory or an achievement, because then that leads to like, oh, I did it, I can do it again, which leads to like, performance anxiety. But rather see like, there's nothing wrong with me. Sleeping happened fine, but I didn't do it. It just happened thanks to me kind of letting go. So just a little point to make. But I think you already saw that. Did it make sense to you?
I think that initially, in the early weeks when I started to recover, I felt euphoric during the day. I really did. It was like a drug. I was just so thrilled. That is now fading because it's becoming more normal to me to sleep, and it did kind of help for me to just allow myself to feel super happy because I'd been feeling super miserable. I really enjoyed, and I've just, as I said before, I've become so much more mindful of the enjoyable things around me, the enjoyable things in life. And there's a little bit of me that doesn't want to let go of that feeling of just, coming out of the bad patch. But I know that normal life is for me to sleep, and I don't have to wake up every morning going, thank God, I can just wake up and go, here we are on another day. But I, in many ways, enjoyed that feeling of recovery because it was such a relief, just such a huge relief to. But I am back to now in more of a regular phase where I assume I'll sleep, and I do sleep, and I even assume I'll sleep after being awake for a little while. All things are possible, and none of those really concern me anymore. And we'll just say, it was some tough real life patches that kind of took me in, and they may come again, and who knows how I'll respond. But I feel like I do have tools. And one of the things my psychologist said to me was, you don't ever really want a perfectly smooth recovery. A patchy recovery is where you learn the lessons, you develop the toolkit, and to see you through in the future. And I think that's what had happened to me in the past. I'd have my bout of insomnia. I would just come out of it without, I don't know why. And so I learned nothing about how to deal with the next phase. I would go into the next phase and be miserable thinking, here I am again. Whereas now I've had that sort of, roller coaster of a recovery. And along the way, I have learnt new skills, developed tools, and hopefully consolidated some of those so that, if the inevitable time when my sleep does become disrupted again, I've got a whole lot of things to turn to. And that's what's going to keep the fear away. Yeah. I've got my toolkit. I've got my, reassurance on that. So the fear is less likely to come because I know what to do.
Yeah, so well said. And what your psychologist taught and shared is exactly how we view it too. That it is like when we have those speed bumps, then we learn or it just reaffirms what we already know, that if I don't, this doesn't require any effort or any change or anything. It's just the fact that I'm not really panicking or responding in any way to this leads to it automatically fading away. And we learned that through going through some ups and downs. So yeah, very, very nicely said. And you already talked about how this was helpful in other areas of life, which is one of my go-to questions for guests. But my other go-to question is, if you could travel back in time and tell yourself something, maybe years ago when you had a bout of trouble sleeping, mm-hmm. what would you tell yourself?
The first thing is that you're not going mad. This isn't madness. It's a very different thing to that fear, and that, to be kind to myself, to not beat myself up about why this is happening, and to not put pressure on myself to say, you can think your way out of this. You just have to be a more positive person. That those things, I think it's just for me to acknowledge this is actually happening, and it's not pleasant, but you will come through it. And the way you'll come through it is to be gentle with yourself, and not to put more pressure on yourself to try to fix this problem.
Yeah, amazing. I think that was so well worded. So it's kind of the perfect place to conclude. So I'll just say thanks so much, Edel, for being a guest and be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Anytime. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi there, it's me, Coach Daniel, and I wanted to say thank you to everyone out there who is spreading the word. You know what I've noticed in the last 6 months to 12 months or something like that is when I ask people how they found us, one of the most common answers is, somebody told me on Reddit. And every time I hear that, it really warms my heart. It makes me so glad to hear that someone went out of their way to tell a fellow human about the Sleep Coach School. If you're one of those people out there spreading the word, I want to say thank you so, so much. And if you're not, then maybe you'll see an invitation in doing so, or you can simply hit the like button or hit the subscribe button. That alone helps so, so much in getting our teachings out there and helping more and more people in the world. That was all I want to say here. Thanks so much for tuning in, and can't wait to see you again.